We speak of Chris Scott, who joins us. Scotty, thank you for coming tonight. We really want to just use tonight to have a chat to you, get to know you a little bit more and get your thoughts, your deep thinking thoughts on the game, where it is and where it's going. So thanks for coming along tonight.
No, it's a pleasure. It'll be good to talk about it, Ed.
Good on you, mate. Now, I'll tell you what I do want to do. Sometimes when you're at the firing line and you're there all the time, it's easy to forget just how great a CV this man has, ladies and gentlemen. So let's just have a look at this. This is Chris Scott. He has coached 339 games after 215 as a player, 554 games at the highest level in the furnace. Two-time premiership coach, two-time premiership player. Have a look at this, though. 9 preliminary finals in 14 years. Has only ever missed finals twice. Second highest win percentage, only behind John Coleman, who coached 205 games less than Chris Scott. So the best by a mile of anyone who's coached 300 games. And that is an amazing CV. Congratulations, mate.
Thanks, Ed. I appreciate it. So I don't actually spend too much time thinking back. I think that's a product of being coached by Lee Matthews. And he obviously came to Brisbane with a great playing and coaching CV, but he always preached looking forward. And he did say that one day you'll get a chance to sort of sit back and reflect on it. Maybe that's what he's doing now, but I don't yet feel like I'm in that stage of my life.
And Bomber Thompson did a great job winning those early premierships for Geelong. He got to the end of his career, and I must admit, in 2010, when Collingwood fixed up Geelong in the preliminary final, Bomber was there. You can see the score. That actually flattered Geelong on that night. Collingwood took them apart. And I thought at that stage, well, there's Geelong done. You came along the next year in the changeover, coming from Fremantle, and you're the only team that beat Collingwood 3 times to win the premiership that year. And I think sometimes, this is not taking anything away from Bomber, because his legacy is absolutely there, but I think sometimes you miss out on your agent of change that rejuvenated so many of those Geelong players. Can I ask you, what was it like coming in at that stage for you as a rookie coach into a team that could have gone either way?
Yeah, it was really interesting, and I do have the opportunity every now and again when I'm asked about it to reflect on it. And like my vivid memory coming in, the most important point, I was 34. So I'd been an assistant for 3 years at Fremantle. You couldn't imagine a young man who thought he was more underprepared to be a head coach. But Geelong knew that. Well, I don't think they thought I was underprepared necessarily, but they knew I needed a lot of support. And it was a really short process too, because Bomber, he left in October, really. So I'd been through the Port Adelaide coaching process, which was a period of months. I think Choco Williams might have left in round 8. So they had a long time, and Geelong was the opposite. And so pretty quickly, within a week, we sort of got together the key people, Brian Cook, Neil Baum, Steve Hocking, and sort of talked footy philosophy, really. And I didn't think I was going to get a job for a start, which I think helped. And I was just able to sort of speak my mind, and they thought there was an alignment there, but very much knew that I would need support, which they gave me in spades. But probably the other thing that was really significant was that the players were ready for change. And it doesn't matter whether you're 34 or 54, if you come in and you have a resistant group of key players, it's going to be really challenging. And I think in a way that prelim final lost the year before to Collingwood, and the kind of sense around the place, and not many people remember it this way, but Geelong people do, the sense was that this was the end of an era.
Very much so.
And so you were thinking that as well, Ed, and the players just weren't going to stand for it. But they knew that the way it had been done, especially tactically on the field, needed to shift a little bit. And for the most part, what we were kind of, when I say we, the 10 to 12 sort of key players, and our coaching staff were aligned on those things. So I turned up, Nigel Lapham was already there. So I played my whole career with Nigel, he's a close friend, but I didn't know anyone else. But really quickly we worked out, we sort of had a shared philosophy on how the game could be played. Like even now, like James Raley's an assistant coach, he's been to the Crows for a few years and come back, but he was one of the sort of, I guess he's a bit younger than I was, but it was good to have people that thought the same way about footy.
So what was your main tactical difference to Bomber? What did you change? What was the first thing you changed, or the 2 or 3 things you changed from what they were doing at the time?
Look, I should say, I suspect that if Bomber had have stayed, he would have changed these things as well. And the assistant coaches, Brenton Sanderson was a key part of that, Blake Carosella, James Raley, but the key players as well. They really, if I could summarise the evolution of the game, sort of 07, 08, I know Geelong didn't win the premiership in 08, but they were the dominant team in the competition that year and probably had a bad grand final. but they were high possession, high handball, user numbers, and some high-quality players around there as well, which is almost the advent of the press. And Collingwood and St Kilda were really at the forefront of that, overusing the ball against that pressure. The players were aligned, and that was a risky way to play, and it probably wouldn't work. So that was probably the core of it. I mean, there were lots of other things as well, but I think back, I don't know how we did it in some respects, because probably the best coach in the club left, or in the game. Gary Ablett left. He was a handy player.
Yeah, reasonable.
Ken Hinckley left the year before. Brendan McCartney left that year as well. Both of the high performance managers left. There was a period of significant change, and I think there was a sense, especially from the players, we're not ready to give up yet. But at the same time, the key people, Stephen Wells was central to this, was like, yeah, we're going to keep having a crack, but we know we need to transition this list. So it was an exciting time, albeit daunting.
So let's fast forward to last week, and again, up against Adelaide. This is one of the great games. I was lucky enough to just sit in the crowd and watch this. It was a fantastic atmosphere. But, what was significant again was the way you found a way and then ran over the top of the Adelaide Crows, but also being able to get in Bailey Smith, put him into the middle of the ground. That opens up Dangerfield, and you've got a 2-for-1. You've got a gun footballer, superstar in Patrick Dangerfield, who is playing career best form now, and you've got this young kid who's got a lot to prove in the middle of the ground. How's that all manifest itself for you?
Well, Max Holmes was our best player last year in a team that was, a kick or two away from a grand final. But he's only sort of 22, 23. And we do have a young midfield if you take out Dangerfield, and depends how you sort of look at Stewart and Blitzarves and those guys. But if you take them out, which we're sort of choosing to do a little bit more, we get quite young. So it's rare to be able to bring in a 23-year-old who's really high quality as well in Bailey. And there's no doubt that that's given us a bit more confidence that we don't need Pat in the middle as much. So you're right, there's been... It is a bit of a double whammy, that one.
So, Chris, Geelong has bucked the trend over a long period of time now from a list management perspective. I know Andrew Mackie and before him Stephen Wells have been at the forefront of this, and you've brought in players from other clubs who've wanted to come, and then you've got bargains really late in the draft or as rookies or even as Category B rookies, as Mark Blitzarves was so many years ago. How have you managed to do this? Every other club seems to have fairly similar philosophies, but Geelong has done it in a different way and it's worked.
Well, I mean, a quick bit of history, and again, I could talk about this for hours. I'll try to keep it succinct. When I came in, we were a high-performing team on the field, which means your salary cap tends to be full and your players tend to be older. And there was a big gap in the middle, and then we had some young developing players who we had some confidence in. But also, we were right at the start of two things that have changed the game in the last 15 years. Free agency coming in was going to change the game, and the expansion teams meant that if you wanted to rebuild, you couldn't do it effectively anyway through the draft. And for a long time, this idea persisted that clubs are only in two positions. You're either rebuilding, which meant you should go to the draft, and take your time. Or if you're trading, it means you think you're in contention. And we never subscribe to that theory. And I think that every club aspires to it, and we've had a lot of luck along the way, there's no doubt about that. But I think one of the things that has helped us, and Ed, I think it's probably true of Collingwood as well and some of the bigger clubs, it's very hard to sell your club if you're trying to bring players in and say, look, we're going to lose most weeks for the next 3 or 4 years, but stick with us. And so we took the view with free agency that if you want to be a club of choice, you've got to make it a good place to be. And I've travelled a lot and I've seen a lot of sporting clubs. Not many of them say we run a fantastic environment, great culture, we just lose most weeks. So doing your best to win is a pretty good idea.
So let me throw that to you guys now. Just take it off Chris for a second, and that leads us straight into West Coast Eagles, doesn't it? So from that point of view, Hurdy, you look at this. This is where West Coast has gone. So, 2018 premiers. One of the few years that Geelong decided not to come down for September, and then have a look at grand final, well, premiership, preliminary final, premiership, miss out, preliminary final, and back in it again. And the West Coast have gone into... Probably the West Coast Eagles, to me, were the team that really were affected for whatever reason in COVID. They completely lost their minds over there.
That's the way the competition is meant to work, though, isn't it? Teams go up, teams go down. That's equalisation. And West Coast have done that, but Geelong have bucked that trend, Hurdy.
But I think to Chris's point,
though,
free agency has helped the bigger clubs, the better clubs, because people want to go where the better programs are, the bigger games are, the better clubs are. Do you think?
Yeah, and I think the way it was intended, or at least the theory was really sound, that if you're a good, high-performing team, you should have a full salary cap, which means you lose players to the clubs that have more room in their cap. I think what's generally happened is if you're a low-performing team, players say, I'll come, but it's just a 50% premium to go to you. So I'm not necessarily saying... And we're really careful to say... We've been a bit lucky too. Like if Paddy Dangerfield didn't grow up in Moggs Creek, he wouldn't be at Geelong.
Yep.
It's not because he chose us as a better club.
Yeah.
We think we have a point of difference. But I think when you think hard about most clubs, they all have a point of difference. It's if you try to sort of mimic what has been done, you end up a bad copy.
It is a spiral you can't get out of a West Coast. I mean, if they're going down this path where they're losing games, you can't attract players, good players want to leave. How do you change that? How do you change that spiral?
Well, it's difficult, and I've never been involved in a full rebuild. The people I know in the industry that have been say it's really hard work. And I would suspect that most at Clubland now would say you only do it if you feel there's no other option.
Your former club did, Chris. Brisbane fully rebuilt, the go-home five, played finals and won a flag last year.
Yeah, but not voluntarily.
No,
and that's
you're
a
right.
that's a
But they're out
long,
of the
that's a
finals.
long period
Don't forget,
of time.
Brisbane had the finals for 15 years.
Yeah.
You know, from the glory days through to the next.
But they were in the depths of despair. You know, they were gone 10 years ago.
But do you say West Coast voluntarily have gone down?
No one voluntarily goes down. I agree with you. But once they do, getting back up has been proven that it can be done, but it's very difficult.
But getting back up, I know from my experience when I came into Collingwood, Mick Malthouse was the reason why we were able to get up.
So good people, Ed.
Well, Mick was it. You know, the media wouldn't have a crack at him. So I could get on with doing what I had to do over in President's Land. And Mick ran the footy department, and Neil Balm was there, and and then Greg Swan came to the club, and suddenly, Swanee was a new CEO, but had been around footy, understood footy. And I've got a bit of a theory at the moment, whether it's at commission level at times, and particularly at our clubs, you can get caught up in governance and
Don't say governance to me, Ed.
No, exactly. Right.
You can't get caught up in governance. Governance is very important.
It's a very important part of it, but it shouldn't just be everything, is what I'm
Yes.
saying. Is that I think it works well when you've got some people in a footy
Absolutely.
area that are there and are prepared to die for the team.
Exactly.
You don't have to be the cheer squad leader,
No.
but it helps sometimes.
I'm going to get in trouble upstairs, but I just want to know from Chris, if you are rebuilding a club, what are the non-negotiables? I'm not talking about West Coast, I'm not even commenting on the club, but let's say you were going into a new club. What are the non-negotiables to get yourself on the right path?
Well, I'm not sure this is the most important part, but we really strongly believe at Geelong that you've got to know who you are.
Yeah.
And if you do look around, and yes, you can take parts from the clubs that have had some success, but the more authentic you are about it, and maybe it's easier at Geelong because it's really clear how we're different to, say, the big Melbourne clubs. Like even geographically, we're different. And so we try to build a program that complements that difference and embraces it. So maybe it's easier to talk about what you shouldn't be. I think it's incredibly difficult to rebuild and sell yourself as a strong organisation where people want to be, not just players, but all people, if all you do is talk about how hard it is,
Yep.
you know, and the difficulties you have. So I have a lot of sympathy for the smaller Melbourne clubs that get poor fixtures and then get accused of not being big financial clubs.
Yeah, but
you could take the best people from the strongest clubs and put them there and they wouldn't do any better.
But I would say West Coast doesn't know who they are right now.
They don't have a brand at the moment.
Yeah.
But it always tends to be, in hindsight, a shorter period than it does in the present. So we don't have to go back too far. I mean, I was at Fremantle as an assistant when West Coast got Nick Natanui with pick 2 in the draft. So by definition, they weren't a strong team then and they won a premiership, you know, in 2018.
Yep.
I think it can happen a little bit quicker. And the whole competition is geared, whether we like it or not, whether we think it's right or not, it's geared to really help those clubs bounce back
I'm going to
fast.
throw our production team into it because they're saying go to another thing, but I want to go back only because I'm a fanboy at heart, and that is, I want to talk about Patrick Dangerfield just for a second, but let's roll the videotape because I want to put him in this category of players. For those upstairs wondering what the hell I'm talking about, roll the vision of Malcolm Blight. Okay, so Malcolm Blight went from being an amazing ruck rover, won everything, to kicking 100 goals in a season. Believe it or not, the year after he was sacked as captain coach. Then we've got this bloke, Jesuit. No, we've got him playing for St Kilda. Who put that in there?
Still a good goal, Ed.
He kicked 100 in 1970 in their premiership year.
That's Lee.
Then there's this bloke called Lee Matthews who went forward and kicked 94 goals in a season as a small forward. If you could ever call Lee Matthews a giant, a small forward. Dangerfield is in that echelon, I think, and is becoming... I hope in the next period people get to see Patrick Dangerfield and enjoy him for the superstar that he is.
And as a forward, hopefully. I mean, I've said this a few times publicly now, but I met him, I'm going to say it was around 2016 when he came to Geelong. And even then, he was about to go on and win a Brownlow, I think, the next year as an inside midfielder. But even then, he said to me, I think I'm a 50-50 forward mid. And that really threw me. I thought it was, I'll go forward a little bit and rest, but I'm a midfielder. He's had this view for a long time. And importantly, I think it works, and I remember Lee well enough to know he still had his power. Pat's not going to be a forward unless he retains his power, which he clearly still
And that's
has.
what's unusual is the way he's kept his power, because a lot of people think they can go forward, but you lose. The older you get, the more power you lose.
Hawthorn on his own at the MCG about 5 years ago, going forward when he had a calf injury one time.
Yeah.
It took him apart. I mean, he's just going to be great. All right, go on. You want to have a go at this?
What time of the year did you meet Paddy Dangerfield in 2016, Chris?
It was a good question. It was definitely during... Oh, I can't remember. But well, just to be controversial, yeah, it was in the middle of the season.
Yeah, fair enough, and so you should. Hey, your brother Brad Scott's been very strong on the soft cap and the lack of money afforded to assistant coaches across the league. This is what he had to say last week.
I talked to the Players Association about pathways for players into coaching, and their feedback is solid. No, the players don't want to do it. They see what the coaches do and they don't want to do that. For the first time I can remember ever in footy, that's happening. And that's been talked about and just disregarded as just a nonsense by the AFL. I don't think coaches have been this disenfranchised with where they feel they're regarded in the competition like they are right now. I can't think of a time.
But if you were a player ending your career tomorrow, let's say, would you go into the coaching pathway?
I'd think a lot longer and a lot harder about it than I did.
So the numbers back this up, Chris. Just 7% of coaches, according to a survey in 2024, say they felt rewarded by the AFL. How big an issue is this and how do you fix it?
Well, it's a huge issue, but I have some confidence that the AFL will fix it. Now, I think it's been a bit slow. I think this is a legacy of the COVID issue. And one of the reasons that it's not just coaches, but it's football departments in general, is that they've been really the cohort that has been asked to bear the brunt of the COVID, I'm going to call it a cash flow crisis. Now, we're well past that. So the clubs got the competition through COVID. The AFL did a good job. You know, they should get a lot of the credit for it. But really, the clubs were on the ground doing the work. They were in hubs for 4 months. And the reward was we're going to cut the soft cap by 30%. Now, they're being disingenuous now by saying, oh, we've added back all these things. Everyone, even them, know that that's not accurate. But when the game's thriving, I think the key people in the industry, like, really, it's not as complicated as saying the key people should be rewarded for what they do. Now, we're the only comp in the world that's capped in terms of the players and capped in terms of our footy department spend, while there are other cohorts that get paid silly amounts of money that probably aren't as important. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can cut this up. You can look at the assistant coaches, but really, I think the time for talking from the AFL, and I think they acknowledge this, it's over. It's just a matter of how they fix it and how quickly they do it. Well, but they will get there.
They've got to fix it. I've got a lot of people who should be going straight into coaching now ringing to have a coffee because they're saying, well, maybe I'll go into the media or go somewhere else. Is there something else I can do? And it's not just one, and we're talking about different players before, but there's a number of players doing it now. And I look at it and I weep for the future, to be honest, because these are the exact personalities and people who can coach and take us to the next level. We've got a lot of people now. We've got the women's competition that needs to be looked after as well. We need more coaches. That's the ridiculous thing. We need more coaches, whether they're amortised across the women's program or whatever. It needs to be a proper profession. And I agree with you that we need to address it very quickly. And maybe if we do State of Origin next year, would you cop that if money from a State of Origin series pre-season that was sold properly and made money went into the game to look after soft cap and other coaches in the system, would be a good thing?
Well, I don't think it'd hurt, but I would counter that. I think there's enough money in the game. It's just how it's distributed that doesn't feel right. Now, can I just say, if Andrew Dillon and Laura Kane, and Richard Gordy for that matter, if they were sitting here, I think they'd be in violent agreement with us. It's just the tardiness with which it's sort of the changes have been implemented, and I acknowledge that there must be challenges there because the simple fix looks easy to us. Now, the reality behind closed doors is often harder. So I think we've just got to back them.
And they're in a hard situation too, Hurdy, because they've got Tassie coming and they've got all these other things. The growth of women's footy is so important, but it costs money. There's a lot of money that is going into the game, but not here.
It's not a lot of money when you talk about the pools in football to go to coaches or football cap. Where's it going, Tom, if it's not going to coaches?
Well, at the moment it's going everywhere else, isn't it? The players' money's gone up.
Specifically, though.
Oh, well, specifically it's being spread everywhere else.
Right.
So that's not specific.
No, but
what I'm saying is it's being
the
spread.
women's game. Tassie's going to cost a lot of money. We're still paying a lot of clubs in the competition to carry it. It's in rude health, the game, but I just think what Scotty's saying is that they've got to get the itemisation right on it. Bailey Smith.
Yeah, Bailey Smith, Chris, is a player that is always at the top of the headlines because he's an excellent player himself, but he's also a big name, and that was his action on the weekend that saw him fined by the AFL. First of all, there's been plenty of people that have been critical of the AFL fining Bailey for that sort of action. What's your view as a coach on that being an AFL sanction?
Well, I don't like fines full stop, so I'm the wrong person to ask. I don't think players should get fined for anything.
I think you are the right person to ask. You're the coach of Geelong.
Yeah, but I don't have any influence over the way the AFL run their operation. If they ask my opinion, I would say treat them like adults. Was it Harley Reid that got fined $1,000? So the way we would handle that, the way we have handled it, and even then we didn't need to impose ourselves too much on Bailey because he voluntarily said, oh, look, time over again, I won't do it. Now, if he does that 7 times, we've got a huge problem. But even then, I'm not sure.
Well, probably meant for 3 weeks if he does it 7 times. But as you're saying, though, Scotty, in that situation, we're encouraging idiots now to give it to players to get a response. Now, OK, you can say the players should put their hands in their pockets and come off the ground. I want to just extrapolate that situation out. We've had coaches this year say to me that they have had crowd interaction. Adelaide is a magnificent ground. We love Adelaide Oval. Please, we love everything about Adelaide. But you still got to walk through the crowd. Running off the ground. I said this years ago at Football Park, they should have a tunnel. I know the aesthetics aren't what we want, but we just had 2 blokes walking to the MCG with guns, all right? So it's a new world we live in. So let's just be smart about it. Let's take the idiots out of the game, I reckon. We need to have some cover on those races, don't we?
Well, every other sport in the world has it.
Yeah.
There's no other sport, professional sport, doesn't have a cover.
And do you feel a bit uncomfortable going through the crowd? Not because you can't handle yourself, but you don't need to be put in a situation.
Well, it's even a strange situation when you have to walk through the crowd. So I left the box, I'm going to say 90 seconds before the final siren. It's a real imposition for the spectators. The Crows supporters were trying to leave. The security are blocking them off. They're kind of agitated. It's just not. Yeah. I don't think it's a good environment. And so I will, here's a little clip for the AFL. They're so conscious of behaviour that might incite, unsavoury acts like, coaches interacting with each other on the bench. But they're all 4 coaches walking through the crowd. Yeah. It's a little bit of a contradiction for me. And look, again, maybe they're not all for it. They just can't come up with a better solution right at the moment. But the Adelaide Oval's been renovated for a while, hasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, but we've just got to take that out of it. Simple as that.
Absolutely.
That's just infrastructure. All right, we're going to take a break. Chris Scott is going to stick with us. In a few moments' time, he and Hurdy are going to go to the board and tell us all about the big game on Thursday night, Brisbane Lions versus Collingwood. We'll also get stuck into that situation. Willie Rioli, also Noah Balta, the controversy there. And as I said, we're looking forward to a Holy Thursday big game coming up between Brisbane Lions and Collingwood. And, of course, Easter Monday, it's the Cats and the Hawks. Welcome back to Footy Classified. Tommy, let's get stuck into some of the big issues that are going around at the moment. Let's start with Noah Balta because right off the top, I think the Tigers have mucked this up and mucked it up big time.
Yeah, the Noah Balta situation will play out this week, Ed, and Richmond have their match committee on Thursday. Of course, they're playing the Gold Coast Suns on Saturday. It's exactly the way it played out last week. We're waiting to hear whether he does play or not. But historically speaking, I think it's important to put this on the agenda tonight. But before I do, let's have a listen to Andrew Dillon and also Adam Uze speak in the last week or so on the possibility of Noah Balta playing for the Tigers while he's awaiting sentencing.
He's been through a lot, so we're keen to get him in because he wants to earn the respect back of his teammates, his club, and our supporters. So to do that, he wants to get out on the field.
We went through a process which was done at the time, and I think we were where it landed. As I said, we don't condone what Noah did. He's learned a lesson, and he'll continue with those behavioural frameworks.
So let's just contrast that with what Steve Morris advocated for about a decade ago. This is significant because Steve Morris is currently at the club as an assistant coach. He, of course, played for the Tigers as well. This is Steve Morris about a decade ago advocating for, against violence in the public space.
Back in 2008, one of my mates went out with a big bunch of my mates. David Mitchell was his name, and they all went out for a fun night out. A few of them got involved in a bit of a blue. David was hit and was unconscious on the ground and then had his head stomped on a number of times. I got the call at about 4 a.m. in the morning from one of my best mates. He said that they were all at the hospital. It was almost a sort of bedside vigil. He was in a coma for nearly 2 weeks. Yeah, his life pretty much changed forever that night. It's sort of everyone's responsibility to stand up and say no to that sort of violence. It certainly can affect your career, but even more substantially, it can affect your life.
So that's Steve Morris advocating a decade ago for step back think. The entire industry thinks Noah Balta shouldn't play this week, apart from Richmond. And it just strikes me that you've got an assistant coach at the Tigers who's making that sort of play and would presumably still have those views.
Yeah, look, again, I don't know why, for the sake of 2 weeks, the Tigers aren't going to win the flag this year. It doesn't matter. Even last week, putting him in first game up against 17-year-olds seemed to me to be bizarre. Let him stay out. Let him go to the court, be sentenced. Then he can come back in. After that, he can be rehabilitated into the community and into the football community. It just seems to me that... I mean, he turned up the game the other day. He was followed in as if he was Tony Mockbell.
Yeah.
You know, so, I mean, it's just putting more pressure on everybody. And there's no win in this whatsoever. And you know, this was him arriving for the game against the under-18s. You know, people door-stopping left, right and centre. And that'll happen this week again.
And why is Adam Uze so keen for him to play? It feels like it's an Adam Uze-led...
Yeah, Adam Uze wants them to play because he's the coach of the team and he wants to win.
Yeah.
But this is a club
But it's
decision.
bigger than a win or lose. I mean, even this whole season for Richmond is bigger than one win or loss.
Yeah, I agree with you, Hurdy.
Scotty, do you look at that? I mean, you don't have to buy into it, but these things come up semi-regularly with players. I mean, we've all faced it.
Yeah.
And you've got to make the right call. Sometimes the right call is the unpopular call too.
That's true. I mean, the way we would think about this, and this is where I think precedent's hard because every situation is unique, and so it's difficult for me to comment because I don't know the ins and outs. And there's a lot that's public in this circumstance. The one counter that I would put forward is that he's already been suspended and he's served his time. I understand the argument that he's yet to be sentenced by the law of the land, but we seem to take this view that AFL players get punished once, then they get punished twice.
Yep.
And then they never really kind of get to make amends for it.
I agree with you.
I mean, take this one out of it because I don't know the specifics of it. I actually don't know this case.
I think this one's different, Chris, because
I get it, and especially when you see that
pending.
really confronting footage.
Yeah.
And I completely understand the view of the majority of society. So I'm trying to talk about something separate because these incidents. And again, I mean, I don't like looking at this vision. I've seen it once, and I don't want to see it again.
Can I say, having been followed around for a year by cameras,
Yeah.
he's better off not to play.
Yeah.
Just stay away, come back. It's better for him, in fact, as a person. I know you want to get out and play, you want to prove it wrong, but being followed around like a criminal for a certain amount of time is not much fun.
There's no fun in it.
No.
I think we've all had to go at that at some stage.
Not fun at all.
Right, speaking of another bloke who's right under the hammers, Jamarra Ugle-Hagan, who's not making life any easier for himself by being, you know, let's be honest, being petulant and ridiculous and stupid in sending this sort of thing out while he's getting paid, what, $700,000, $800,000 a year?
Important to note, he didn't send it out, but of course he's in the video.
But he's doing it.
So he's getting paid, and this is a very simple... Is there a point that they stop paying him?
Well, you can't do it. That's the problem.
You've got to properly break your contract in a way that leaves the club no choice.
Well,
He's having espresso martinis with friends. The club wouldn't love that, given that he hasn't played, and they wouldn't love that he's been posting on social media.
But it's not the espresso martinis. He hasn't been at training, and I know there's been.
Well, he has been the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, but he hasn't been all the time.
Correct, and I'm with you completely. The issue is that he doesn't seem to be learning from the issues that he's having with the club, with everyone else around him. They want to trust him, but he's not giving him that many reasons to do so.
Is this a tough one, Scotty, where they're trying to fatten him up for market at the end of the year, or rehabilitate him and take him through a tough period and give the kid as much love as you can? Wayward at times, as we see it everywhere. It's not like this doesn't happen in the best of households, far less in football land. It's a vexed situation. There's no real easy answer, but that really seems to be thumbing your nose. And I think the only way you can get to this is to actually cut off the money and say, mate, no more.
Again, so hard for me to talk about because I just don't know the situation. But I think Hurdy would sort of support me on this one, as a coach especially. But the footy club's number one priority is to support their people, especially the young people that are having problems. And I just get a little bit concerned when you see isolated incidents like that we all jump to conclusions and say he's completely off the rails. It may well be true, and that's a difficult situation if it is true. But the best people to handle that situation right at the moment are the Bulldogs, and I think we're in a cutthroat industry. There's no question about that. We do want to win. You made the point about Adamuze, but I would kind of push back a little bit. I don't think Adamuze's number one priority right at the moment is to win every week. I think he's thinking more about building a culture, and I think he would be thinking hard about how he handles the Balta situation. I'm sure Luke Beveridge is with Jamarra.
Would you be interested in Jamarra at the end of the year if he was available?
I always give the same answer to this. We consider everything, and we're really open to having dangerous conversations.
Yep.
And I think we've got to the point now where if people want to criticise us for considering things, we'll wear that.
Yeah.
Now, just because we talk about it doesn't mean we're going to do it necessarily. But yeah, they're challenging situations because everyone sees the talent. We wouldn't be talking about this if he wasn't such a talented young player. But I think the point about in a really competitive environment, your salary cap is one of the key markers. And so when you're paying someone a lot of money to not play, you kind of want them to be doing everything they can to get back on the park.
And you're getting knocked off by big teams, like on the weekend and against Collingwood a couple of weeks back by a kick, and you go, 750, 800,000 of my salary cap drinking vodka martinis. We'll take a break. When we come back, and he's a good kid, that's the thing. I think everyone wants to get him back in and look after Jamarra. So if you are watching, and I doubt it, Jamarra, but if you are, and you see this, mate, we're all on your side. Come on, let's get back in town. We're going to have a good look at that game tomorrow on Thursday night, which is Collingwood and Brisbane, with Chris Scott and James Hird. It's Coach's Corner.
25 minutes to make a name for yourself like you never made before.
Yes, thank you, Ed. We've got the best coach of the last 15 years sitting next to us, and we're going to have a look at the Pies go up to Brisbane this week, your old side you played for. You played against the Lions about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Yep. They're a fantastic team in all three phases, defence, attack and around the ball. Look at this footage here where we see Collingwood played them, last team to beat them in round 23 last year. The ball movement at Collingwood is very important when they play Brisbane, isn't it? This fast ball movement to break through the lines.
Yeah, well, they're very well structured these days, Brisbane, and this will be an interesting game because they are two contrasting styles. So, as we said, Hurdy, it does help when you have Nick Dacos breaking the lines like that. Not every club can offer that, but the contrast is Collingwood like the ball live, they like it fast. Brisbane will control the ball a bit more from the back half and look to mark it. So it'll be an interesting battle to see who gets the game on their terms.
And Collingwood keeping it skinny, so if they turn it over, Brisbane don't come straight back through.
Well, that's the other part of their offence, Brisbane. They can really build it off the back of bad turnovers. So you've got to be... it's one thing to want speed on the game, but if you turn the ball over in your attacking midfield, Zorko and those guys flying through the middle, especially at the Gabba, can be really hard to stop.
The other strength of Brisbane is their mid-sized defenders, but particularly, obviously, Harris Andrews. He just plays an important part of the game. Collingwood are going to have to really keep him out of the game here. We see in round 23, Hoskin Elliott really keeping Harris Andrews out of the game, and then, as we see in the future edits, involving himself and getting in the scoring chains.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's true of a lot of that. And it's interesting even seeing Darcy Moore, who's probably, a similar sort of player up the other end, very proactive. You can't just expect that you're going to outread Harris or Darcy all the time. But if you're ultra defensive on them, it sort of plays into their hands as well. Harris and Darcy will beat you one-on-one, especially if you take a smaller player like Hoskin Elliott. So you've got to find ways to make them defend as well. And clearly, Hoskin Elliott at ground level would be a challenge in that situation for Harris. He's 204 centimetres.
Yeah, and I think Collingwood going up, they have a chance. The way they play can test Brisbane. The other big game this week is obviously your game, Easter Monday. It's a fantastic rivalry. Geelong Hawthorn has been for such a long time. Port Adelaide showed us how to kick goals against Hawthorn. I think that over the last 5 weeks, Hawthorn have been able to create turnovers through Barras. And Weddle, Sicily, taking those intercept marks at certain times and getting attack off the back of that. Port Adelaide, though, were able to isolate these players and take them out by using their ball movement. And look at this kick by Butters, look at kicking off the line of Willie Rioli over in the middle of the ground. Bypassing those taller backs before them is very important if you want to score.
Yeah, and I won't make too many comments about Hawthorn given we play them this week, but more concentrating on maybe the role that Pal Pepper played. He was sort of near Sicily for big parts of it. And Port really got their sort of attacking midfield into the game, and like even Lord there with the ground ball. The one thing everyone knows about Hawthorn at the moment, Sicily's a great player, maybe still a little bit underrated, but the other guys back there are tall.
Yeah.
You know, Weddle's a tall man, Brass is obviously a tall man. You know, they're sort of choosing not to play Frost. They're and then I guess Amon and Impey. This is me not talking too much about Hawthorn, by the way.
Keep going, we love it.
But Port were able to sort of get the game on their terms early. We played Port midway through last year down in Geelong, and they did a similar thing to us. When their midfield's on fire, you can sort of look at the opposition, and obviously we've looked at Hawthorn this week, and maybe read a bit too much into it. Maybe Port were just hot for that period of time.
Yeah. And the other thing they did really well, Port, was when they turned the ball over mid-arc, they were able to get it back into their forward line really quickly and turn the Hawks defenders around. You love it as a forward if you can turn that defender around the ring back towards goal, or they're a bit disorganised. We've seen these edits here. Port are able to turn the ball over and just zipped it straight back in the forward line as quickly as possible and put those Hawks, as you said, those Hawks defenders under pressure.
Yeah, and I think that this is probably a little similar to what we talked about with Collingwood. This is the way they would like to be playing Brisbane. Get the ball in there quickly when Andrews isn't set, because there's one thing to be patient, but your patience kind of gives Andrews a chance to get set as well.
Great stuff, boys. It's amazing. You want to add something else here?
I was just going to say, if you could give us one insight into what you thought you can take into the game on the weekend. Is it your spare, their spare? Is it around the contest? What's the main theme that you'll give to your players?
Oh, we're really respectful of the way Hawthorn use the ball.
Yep.
And it's the most boring coaching answer of all time to say that, defence is crucial. But I don't think it's a secret, out there in the competition at all that, if you give really good ball using teams, bad turnovers where they can exploit you, it's going to be a hard day. No defence can kind of cover for that.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. Thanks, Chris, for being more open and speaking far more about Hawthorn Geelong than what you wanted to do.
Yeah, that was more than zero, wasn't it? The zero that I promised.
Hey, by the way, just a stat to consider at the moment. Hawthorn with Will Day, 16 wins, 4 losses the last 2 seasons. Without Day, 3 wins, 7 losses.
He's a fantastic player.
He's a fantastic player. He was badly missed.